Hey everyone, welcome back to the show. In today's episode, I'm joined by Rich Westhead, who is the Managing Director of AJ Group. Now, if you're an avid listener of this show, you will know that I had Ash Knight, the founder of AJ Group, on the podcast back in June. So just to give you a bit of an overview, AJ Group operate in the advanced construction space, chemical life sciences space, but they're quite an interesting one where a lot of their staff are fully remote or work very hybrid. And a topic of conversation in this particular episode is how on earth do we get people working across Europe, across the world, working along the same target operating model? How do you maintain such a good culture? The episode I did with Ash, they talked about having 0% attrition, so fantastic culture, but it's very challenging for a lot of founders to maintain that culture, maintain the sales culture when people are dotted around Europe or around the world. So that's exactly what we get into in today's episode. Rich himself has transitioned from working at companies like Manpower and Search Consultancy, did a bit of research on Search Consultancy. There's over 2,000 people in that business. So a little bit of a transition going into boutique, which he opens up a little bit about. So this is a brilliant episode. I'm sure you guys are going to really enjoy it. Finally, you would have heard me talk on previous episodes around what we're doing with Milo. So this week we've actually started our early access group. And what that means is customers essentially get 2 weeks access to Milo, and they are going to work very, very closely with us and have direct input to what the product looks like when it comes to market. So a very quick snapshot, because again, I said this in the last episode, but people might be thinking, okay, what actually is Milo? Essentially, it's a completely 100% in the flow of work digital sales coach. So if you imagine someone like me, even a billing manager or just an internal, external L&D person, sat by the side of every single one of your consultants, listening into their calls, giving them feedback and making them better at the thing that makes recruitment consultants great, which is the human stuff. Speaking to people, building relationships, dealing with objections, pitching, all that kind of stuff. But overall, they have a place to practice as well in the dojo. Managers have full analytics. So not just when a consultant adds a lead to the system, but how many times they've asked for a lead on a call, how many times or how they're actually asking for leads, how they're pitching your most premium service. All that kind of stuff is all in this platform, but it's entirely practical learning. So there's no video library, there's no, modules or anything like that. Consultants will only ever get better at the job by being on the phone, and that's exactly why we created Milo. So as you can tell, super excited, very excited about this episode for you guys to listen to this. Keen to hear your thoughts, so make sure that you like, comment, subscribe, and let's get into this week's episode. Hello everybody, welcome back to the 1% Better Recruitment Podcast. I'm your host, Charles Kiriakou. Today I'm joined by Rich, and it's quite an interesting one because I actually had the founder of AJ Group on the podcast, 2-3 weeks ago, and part of that episode, we spoke a lot about him essentially giving the keys to a managing director and stepping away slightly and doing different things within the business. And throughout that conversation, he was actually very complimentary of Rich, who's with us today, and said to me after, I'll tell you what, you and Rich are quite similar. I think, Rich has got a slightly different story and some other topics that you guys can talk about. Get him on. And we are here today. So Rich, for people that may or may not know you, and your background, what you do, etc., tell the people a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Charles. Thanks for having me on. So I've been in recruitment for longer than I'd like to probably admit, but maybe sort of 25 years. I've worked across 3 companies. So I started working for Manpower back in 2000. So that was a good grounding and corporate business back in the early 2000s, good training. And then 2005, I wanted to get into more. I could see the market was going much more specialist than general. A lot of the bigger companies back then were a bit more generalist. Moved across to work for Search Consultancy. Spent 19 years there. That was more specialist, so that was working within sort of industrial, logistics, manufacturing, engineering, and into hospitality as well. And that was obviously a large national business. And then I left in 2024, met Ash. I actually met Ash for some advice with his rep to rep background on markets to go in and everything else. And then without realizing 5 or 6 meetings later, I was accepting a job offer for Ash at AJ. So it was an interesting story. But I've been at AJ for approaching 2 years, which I can't quite believe it's gone that quick. And we are a global recruitment business specializing across advanced construction, chemical and life science, and logistics. And we work across the UK, Europe, and US. So I've had a good background I've worked for a large corporate, I've worked for a large UK national business, and now I'm working for a sort of a rapidly expanding boutique, and enjoying the challenge of Europe and the US, which is where where we trade a big chunk of our business comes from.
Yeah, love it, mate. Well, I'm buzzing to get into this one today. We've got some really interesting topics, and one of the first things we were going to speak about is something that I'm always quite fascinated about, and it's a topic around building a recruitment culture across a variety of teams within a business and different countries. And the reason why I think this is quite an interesting one, Rich, is because post-COVID, a lot of companies introduced hybrid working and people started to realize, oh, I can hire people across Eastern Europe, across South Africa, et cetera, et cetera. But I've said this on the podcast before. No one has really ever had training on how to manage remotely. Like, correct me if I'm wrong there, but I certainly didn't. So
Yeah,
during the pandemic, when I had to manage a team remotely, like I was like, what the heck? So I think it's very challenging for businesses to maintain a strong culture if you've got people dotted around the world, dotted around Europe, etc.
agreed.
Talk to me a little bit about the journey you guys have been on in regards to that. Hey guys, quick one before we jump back into the episode. If you are a recruiter who feels like half your week disappears into admin, follow-ups, data cleaning, and jumping between several different tools, then listen up because this episode is officially sponsored by Sourcewell. Sourcewell is the recruitment productivity platform, and I don't just mean another tool that you'll forget to use. I mean the tool that actually gives you your time back. You can run your entire desk in one place. Outreach, sourcing, data enrichment, multi-step email and LinkedIn sequences, inbox management, and even call notes. It's all there, synced, automated, and according to their stats, recruiters using Sourcewell see 56% higher response rates, double the pipeline, and approximately save around 8 hours of admin every single week. If you're like me, admin as a recruiter is the devil, and this productivity platform really helps you save a load of time. So reach out to Sourcewell, go to sourcewell.com. It's a fantastic platform. I've used it myself. I really believe in it, and I'm super grateful for them sponsoring the podcast. Let's get back into the episode.
Culture for me is critical. I think good companies can become bad with bad cultures, and obviously, I think a culture is what everything's built around. Myself and Ash obviously share a passion about creating an environment for people. So I think it starts with me and Ash first and foremost. I think we have to embody the culture, we have to support it, we have to foster it for everybody, and we have to back up what we say. So I think our vision was to build a business that was high performing, high rewarding. You know, we've got an exceptionally good bonus scheme, probably one of the better ones in the industry, one of the best ones in the industry. And we wanted to then, and I'll talk later about, want to then implement the best tech we can get and try and give people the sort of the best tools in a high performing environment. The key for us is we want to then give people flexibility and autonomy and an adult environment. And that's quite tricky when you think about I've got staff currently who are based in local to where I am. We've got staff based in Liverpool, Manchester, London, but we've also recently hired in Naples. We've got an office in Valencia, so we've got people in Valencia. We've got people in Prague. We've got people in all sorts of far-flung places. I think the leadership, what we've tried to do is create a bit of a plan that everyone is on board for, that each business knows what we're trying to achieve collectively, and then we've put a lot of infrastructure behind the scenes really to make sure that everyone's got opportunity, everyone's treated like an adult, everyone can earn high money, and people are also seeing us back that by putting good tech in place. So the hopefully not too long answer is that we've got a collective idea that we wanted to do, and we've got the sort of senior leadership team who report into myself who are managing the business in that way.
I think that's a really important point, isn't it? That where I've seen businesses that expand across Europe, open up an office in the US, maybe someone from the UK goes to lead that up, etc. Typically, when I've seen it go quite sour is when the managing director, sales director, CEO, whatever it might be, doesn't necessarily articulate the vision, the mission, and also communicate what's going well and what's not going well in the business on a regular basis. I can't remember who it was that come on the podcast, and they said that you can never really over communicate. Like, you should be obviously within reason, obviously, but you should be telling people pretty much everything that's going on so that people are on board the train and know what's happening, what the challenge is, etc. But also constantly reminding them of what the mission is, what your values are, etc., etc. But I tend to see a lot of businesses don't do so well at that. What do you think?
Yeah, I'd agree. I think I think it's a fine balance in the fact that if we've got people who, like I said, we've hired someone who's working in Naples, it's a fine balance to make sure she feels part of the business and is what we're trying to achieve. I think we have regular comms. We have monthly town halls where everyone comes on and I run a town hall where everyone shares their success and the results. We actually brought people together for the first time last year in December. The whole business. We flew everyone into rainy Manchester, which
Fun.
we had a good day actually. We did an event for the guys and a breakfast, an event for the guys in the day, and then a meal in the evening. But it's the first time we'd done that.
That's
So
cool.
I think regular sort of teams meetings, I think, has helped. The guys will get their teams together, 3 times a week, whatever, so they're feeling part of a bigger culture. But I think if you're going to bring people into a business, no matter where you are, the way it works needs to suit the individual. So I think having a rule of we work 5 days in the office or we work 4 days, I think that's quite tricky depending on who you're going to hire. Um, if we've got 100 people in a room and I don't know 21 flexibility for childcare and everything else, you've got to tailor your culture and your environment and your operating hours to suit the person. And we've done that. We've got some quite extreme examples of that, which have proved to be really successful that probably other people might not have made the decision to do. So I think communication is critical for us and getting everyone together. I probably speak to the senior team daily, and we sit down and we review weekly, sometimes twice weekly, but not in an overkill way, more in a supportive, strategical way. I don't
Mm,
want them to feel like they're on their own, and we don't run a massive KPI bashing business. It's more about
mm,
output. How do we improve people on that bit?
mm. Awesome. Yeah, there's a couple of things there that resonated with me. The daily communication, when I first became a billing manager and we had two different types of people come and do some training with us, but the one that stuck the most was a guy called Ashley Rice. I should probably get him on the show. I've mentioned him so many times. But it resonated with me so much because like we had the start of the day was like a check-in, kind of like a bit of a team huddle, like what's the plan for today, what we're going to
Yeah,
achieve. Lunchtime was like we'd set our sprints and then say like I would knowing you know what it's like with ADHD, it's like don't bother me unless you can't Google it or you desperately it's like urgent. Otherwise, let me crack on because you know what I'm like. And then
yeah,
lunchtime, it was like, cool, what are we doing for lunch? What have we achieved? Go for lunch, come back, cool. What's the plan for the rest of the day? Cool, let me crack on. I'll let you crack on. End of the day, what were the wins? It's kind of like a positive thing. And like Monday was one-to-ones, Friday was a group with a beer, like how's the
right.
week, etc., etc. And that really, really worked for me. Doing it remotely though, I've seen this in businesses where the consultant will work from home. They just don't hear from their manager, and then the consultant doesn't necessarily do well, and then they get a bollocking, mind my language, the next day
Yeah.
because they haven't done very well working from home. And it's like, well, if they're in the office, you're checking in with them 3 days a week. Why aren't you doing that remotely?
Agreed. And I think you kind of probably have to do it more to make sure they're supported. But the concept for me coming from the backgrounds I've worked in the past, everyone's in the office or had been in the office sort of up until sort of the last 4 or 5 years, and then it became a lot more flexible. What stuck with me is if we're going to hire somebody who we're going to start in Prague or they're going to start in Paris, well, their first day is going to be in their own home. So we've got to make sure the induction's spot on. We've got to make sure they've got all the kit. We've got to get them involved with all of their team and all of their colleagues. I did a client meeting last year with myself and Ash jumped on a client meeting, really successful business. And the lady had been working there, one of the senior clients for 6 months. She'd worked for some huge brands like that everybody would know. And she said it's the best company she'd worked for and she's fully remote. And I had to, during the meeting, I said to her, I find that not surprising, but what's the reason? And she said, I've never felt part of something as much as I do now. The communication's really good. And the fact that I don't see everybody on a daily basis or weekly basis doesn't make any difference because I think teams and everything else, you can build relationships. I still think face to face is
Yeah,
the best way, but that's not always possible. I think from a team's point
100%.
of view, I think that's the way to do it. But for me, if I've got people remote, we've got responsibilities as an employer to make sure the onboarding's good, the training's good. We can't demand things from people or start looking at performance until we've done our part.
It's a really good point. And look, I mean, I've met Ash 3, 4 times. I've met you. This is the second time, all remote
Yeah.
because we're different ends of the country, right? And hopefully
Mm.
one day we'll meet in person, of course.
Yeah.
But you certainly can build relationships via Zoom. I mean, I work with agencies that do only EU or US recruitment from London or from Manchester. They can't
Mm.
do face to face. They might go once a quarter to New York or something. So you absolutely can. But I think it's a really good point, actually, that that anecdote you mentioned about that person, that the good agencies that are either fully remote or very hybrid, maybe two days a week in the office, there's two things. Because I'm going to go back to something else you said. Is that it's not bad to over communicate, and if you're doing it in a supportive way, not because you don't want the consultant going, oh my god, my managing director's calling me again. Oh my god, I better get all my ducks in order. And it's like, well, no, they're calling to make sure you're good. Like if there's anything they can do to help, how you get on with the search, like can I help you with your Boolean or whatever it might be, right? But there's something else you mentioned a second ago around it's escaped me, but talking about managing people remotely. Sorry,
Yeah.
for people listening to this, because I know so many people that really struggle with managing people or bringing people on a hybrid way. Like, what's the best way to kind of initially talk to them about the communication structure, like how many times you're going to speak to them? Yeah, let's just start with that. Like, what's the best way to kind of go around that?
Well, the teams will all work slightly differently. Our construction business is predominantly based in the UK, albeit hybrid and remote. And then our chemical and life science team is spread all over Europe and everything else. So I think letting people know what's going to happen. So if someone's coming into our life science business, they'll get obviously the initial induction from Siobhan, then they'll meet Seb, who'll have met during the interview process. He leads that business, um, and they'll be integrated into the team. The team is a big team now. We've got 10 or 11 spread all over Europe. They meet 3 times a week, I think, normally at the moment, sort of Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and it's not just figures what we do, and it's what plans there are for the week, and they're building a good sort of camaraderie between them. Aside from that, we've also got a best practice. We don't call it training, we call it best practice, and
Mm.
we've created a training and best practice suite, if you like, of
Mhm.
here's how we think retainers should be sold, here's how we think sales visits should be told. So they'll go through all that as well, and it's done very much on okay, here's how this is all of our experience, this is how we would do it. And then you take the bits that you're comfortable with and add your own piece to it. So I think if you then add in, we use Slack for general comms, so every fee goes on there. So we've got people celebrating fees lots of times a week at the moment, which is brilliant because obviously
Mm.
we're growing monthly. So you kind of can't not feel part of it, I would imagine, very quick because the communication's so open. And I think once they're in sort of 2, 3, 4 weeks, they'll very much get into a routine. We don't want to bash people with KPIs. My view on that, and it filters down between the teams. We've got adults working for us. We want people to know what they're good at. So you might take a lot less to get a job on than I do, or I might find a candidate much better than you. We need to tailor it. So we have KPIs in place to allow the managers and the directors within, I don't know, 6 months of monitoring someone to know what their ratios should be. So rather than saying you need to do this every week and everyone's got the same, it's tailored. So I'd like to think if you speak to people who work here, they feel it's a very adult-based environment, and I think that remote culture doesn't change. I think you've still got the opportunity to do that.
Mm. Yeah, that's a good point. I always found it baffling when I've seen recruitment businesses say, right, everyone needs to do all the same KPIs. I'm like, just
Ridiculous.
makes
Yeah.
zero sense to me. Because
Yeah.
to your point, like when it came to like the delivery stuff, I was terrible. Like some people with ADHD are great because they get into the hyper focus of a LinkedIn project and stuff. I found that stuff so boring.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
I was just great. If you gave me to this day, me and my business partner joke around this right now. I'm like, if you give me a list of like 100 contacts with names, numbers, etc.,
Speaking.
I'm buzzing because all
Yeah,
I'm going to do is go call, voicemail, call, great, have a conversation, book a meeting, bosh. And now with the wonderful thing of AI, like all my admin is done for me. But back in the day when it was like go and build a project and create your own Boolean, I was like, oh my God. To the point
yeah,
where I was like, I need to hire someone to do that because it's just not my skill set. And then
yeah.
we started to realize that my meeting to job ratio was really, really high. So it was like, okay, let's just let's just get Charles just booking loads of client meetings. And especially if you've got people into the office, it was like a 1-1 ratio. For whatever reason it was, if they come and met the entire company, we got the job on there and then, right? So I think that's really, really important. Something that just come back to me now. So we spoke about this last time we spoke on a call that yes, you've got an adult environment, we've got people with kids, etc., etc. I feel like some businesses struggle though if somebody, maybe it's different if they have kids, for example, but if someone has like slightly different kind of I don't know what the right word is for it, but like if someone's working, they start a little bit later because they want to drop the kids off or whatever. Like sometimes there's like chat in some recruitment businesses around, oh, how comes they get to have that? How, and it's different for everyone, if that makes sense. So you see some businesses that like, no, everyone works the same hours, everyone does that. You're obviously very different and it's working tremendously. So talk me through that because I feel some founders listening to this might find it quite interesting.
Well, I think it depends on your model. I think if you're the business that if you're a type of business that's going out and hiring trainees by the or associates or graduates by the dozen and they need training, then they might need to be around experienced people sort of in the early stages. But I think once someone's up to a certain sort of level of competence, it needs to tailor their lifestyle. I've got a couple of examples and of people who I've interviewed and I like them, they're good, and we're moving down the track, and they'll say, "Do you know what I'd love, more than anything would be to pick my son up from primary school once a month." And I'm like, right, okay. I was like, well, what about if you pick them up 3 times a week? And they're like, what do you mean? I was like, well, you'll get a set of expectations from us. You'll get support. You'll get, training. You'll be part of a bigger team. If you want to go and pick your son up at 2:30, 2:45, and be back at 3:30, and you manage your hours, but you're getting the balance that you need versus someone else actually who, and we've got examples of this, people who they don't want to work from home, they don't have children, they want to be in an office. Well, our offices are 5 days a week open because we'll use co-working spaces or the offices that we've got. And we have people, I do it sometimes, I'll go in on a day where the other guys aren't in because we, in Liverpool, for example, we'll be in 2 days a week, 3 days from home, which suits me. But for other people, some with young children who are off on half term, they want to be in the office so they can get work done. So, it's not for us to judge. It's not for me to say, because if I make you do something that I think is right, I don't know what your outside world's like. So, I think you've got to tailor it to the team. We have an adult based environment. We have people that live within. I mean, the advanced construction team pretty much lives within 45 minute drive of Manchester. We had an office in Manchester. They didn't want to drive into Manchester because of the commute was a nightmare. They were losing 10, 12, 14 hours a week. And they asked, could they take themselves remote? And I don't think many companies would have said yes. We had our office in Liverpool and we were like, yeah, if that's what the guys want and they want to get to 5:30 and finish and go and take the baby out or go and take the dog for a walk. And the results we've seen since doing that is massive, because we've still got as much. I don't like to use the word control, but we still know what's
Yeah.
happening, and the performances are great, but we're listening to people. So I've got a very, very strong thought process on that you have to tailor it to the individual. And if someone came to me and said, well, they're doing that, I want to do it, I'd be like, well, what do you want to do? What suits you? And you'll have the same expectations as them. We're trying to, you've got to tailor your environment and your culture to suit different people. And the people that are going to put their hand up and say, that's not fair, he's doing that, they're probably not our people. They're probably not AJ
Mm.
people. So
I love that. That's such a great culture to have because, especially for like, as you know, someone with ADHD, we think very differently, right? And I've worked in businesses
yeah,
before where I was probably the only ADHDer and like no one really knew much about it. And there were certain things that would happen that it just didn't really necessarily work for me, right? And I just wish that, looking back, people were kind of more aware on the fact that, people work differently and giving that freedom, that flexibility to allow people to have that. Because now I've got a 1-year-old now, and I was in London with my business partner yesterday, and my brother and his missus just had another baby
yeah,
that was born a couple of days ago. And obviously, I'm fortunate now that I've got my own business, so I came into the office and then said I need to leave at 4 o'clock to go and do that,
yeah.
and got home just as soon as we got home. That sorted the baby out, just finished up with a couple of emails and stuff. But like we've been really strict with ourselves. Now we are in a proper sprint kind of mode where
Yeah.
we have like daily expectations and like weekly goals now. So we literally communicate 2, 3 times a day, like the three of us, and it's like, what have we done? What have we achieved? And since doing that, mate, and giving ourselves the freedom and flexibility, we've just been so much more efficient. And I think what you've just said there, it's eye-opening, because there are still some businesses that are quite archaic in the way they're thinking. And look, some businesses do really well. Like some businesses are just fully in the office. But the thing that I've always said is like, if that is the way you operate, just tell people flat out from the start. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? If that's the way I've worked with some businesses that they will never ever let anyone work from home, regardless if you've got kids or not. That's just the way they operate. And if that's the way, that's your mantra, cool. But if you want to be more sort of open-minded and all the rest of it, then everyone's different, right?
And if you and obviously I'm very niche focused. I always have been about sort of people being in a lane and working on certain pieces. If you've got someone who's really good, who has experience and works in your niche and can add real value, but they live in, I don't know, Barcelona, and they want to be remote, or they live in, we've got someone who we've hired who lives in Ipswich, for example. So that it's not a Barcelona, but they're still not near our UK office, and they want to be remote and they want to progress. We've also said we've got examples at the moment of people who are in these locations who want to progress. They want to be managers, they want to be directors. That's absolutely fine. We've when I joined the business, we put in an internal promotion policy so everyone can see what they've got to do to get to their path, billing path or leading path. If I use the example in Ipswich, for example, if they and this is in place now, if they want to become a manager, okay, well, come in, bill, which they've started doing really well. And if you get to the point where you want to grow out and grow out your business, we'll look at creating a small office and we'll build around it. The reason we're in one of the reasons we're in Valencia is because Seb's there. He's brilliant. So remote or different locations, and this is what our companies massively miss, doesn't mean that your career is going to be based at your house. But if we hire someone and 6 to 12 months in, as we've got examples happening now, and as has happened with Seb, if they're really good and they want to progress, okay, we'll open an office there and you can start building, and also it'll just be another extension of our culture. So remote doesn't have to be in your house. We'll be interested to see our office network in 5 years' time, because it'll be very much led by who we hire, who's successful and sort of them wanting an opportunity. But we've done it already. We've done it once. We would happily do that again.
Yeah. Last thing on the kind of remote topic before I talk about the next topic, just purely out of curiosity, because I made a bit of a joke yesterday. So one of our advisors lets us work in his office in Moorgate sometimes. And we were working in the office yesterday. Me and my business partner, we had a meeting in the morning. It was like, right, what's our focus? Like, we've got a big demo week next week. How many demos do we think we can get booked? And being the classic optimist, I was like, I reckon I could get 5 in today. And my business partner was like, 5, yeah? And I was like, who are you going to get them from? And I was like, probably these 5 people, but I've got like 15 people I'm going to reach out to today. And I made a joke and said, whenever I'm with you in London, people just answer the phone. If I call people working from home, it's very rare people answer the phone. I don't know why, but it's just the way it is. Lo and behold, the first 5 people I called, sounds great, Charles. Let's book a demo. I'm free on Wednesday next week. Literally booked 5 demos in the first 5 calls that I made. By the end of the day, I had plenty more meetings booked. I had a few calls today, booked a podcast. I was like, this has just been the best day.
You
And
need to
obviously,
work in the office more then.
this is it. I said to Sachin, our advisor, I was like, mate, can I just be full time in your office? Like, as much as I love my wife and my baby, but like, whenever I'm working from home, just constantly, my wife would just knock on the door, and I just do this now. Even if I'm not on the phone, I'll just do
Yeah.
that. And she'll be like, "Oh, are you busy?" I'm like, "No, I'm just faffing around. Like, what do you want? Like, can you take the washing in?" I'm like, "Oh," and I've tried my best to communicate, and even if I'm on like ADHD medication, so it does help, but it takes that extra while to kind of get back into the flow of like, right, sales mindset, gonna make some calls. Oh, you didn't take the bin out. You're like, fuck, and it takes an extra while. So the reason why I'm mentioning that to you is, quick question: what things have you learned, or what have the guys and girls in your team kind of learned when working from home? Because I think recruiters, founders, anyone listening to this will be like, yeah, I sometimes struggle working from home. Is there any sort of tips, tricks, advice that you can give to people to kind of maximize working from home?
Well, I think we have key sort of expectations. So we don't really track sales calls per se. It's not that type of business. It's more around sort of unique candidates in your market, where you take them to market. I guess it depends on the individual, because we've got working mums and dads. So I think making sure they've got the ability to be set up at home. I think working from home across a dining room table is for me, with my ADHD tendencies, is an absolute no. I need my own office space. I need to be away. I think I think when you're working for a business that's on a journey and you all know your part in that journey and they're all, aiming to get to the next piece, then I think there's the self motivations there. I think when you're part of a team and you're all reporting results together, it makes you want to do it. I think if you give people the flexibility, and this might sound the reverse of what I mean, but if I give you flexibility and you come out of an environment where you're not allowed to leave the office between 8 and 6, and if you want to go and you stop apologizing for going to pick your son up from primary school because you want to see him for half an hour, it's incredible how much work you do because you're being given the best of both worlds. You've got the balance, and I want you as someone working for us to feel empowered, have the balance with your family because you'll work better in work. So I think your working environment's important. I think being motivated and know that you're actually part of something and it can grow into something. But also I think having that autonomy and flexibility and regular support kind of makes you not let us down, but
Hmm,
not
I
want
get
to
that.
be successful because I've got everything I need here. I've got tech stack, I've got, and so that would be my
Hmm,
answer, I think.
yeah, I think that last part there, like, it sounds a bit weird when you say it out loud, but like, not like you don't want to let the person down, but
No,
if I had a meeting, if I was one of your
yes,
consultants and said to you, okay, this morning I want to have 5 quality conversations with these clients that I'm chasing. I want to find really good candidate, and I've got 10 businesses I think I could spec that person out to. And it gets to lunch, and it's like, oh, I haven't really made any calls. I haven't really actually found any good candidates. I'm going to feel like, I feel like a bit of a dick because you've given me everything and now I'm kind of letting you down type thing. So I feel like that's quite an interesting part as well. And as I said to you, like the thing that I've learned in the last week is that when you're part of a team and you're working remotely, those regular calls, those regular, like we send voice notes in our group chat every day, like I had this wicked conversation, even if it's nothing, but you just had a good chat, hearing that from your peers as well kind of motivates you to go, oh, great. Like I want to have a really good conversation. I want to share some insights, etc., etc. So I think,
well,
yeah,
I speak to people who are remote and in offices. There's people working regularly in offices who don't sit down and have reviews with their leaders and managers at all. They sit in the same room. So I think if you've got supportive leaders and supportive managers and directors who are genuinely, looking at your business, how does your strategy work? What's successful, not how many calls have you done, need to do more. It's like what's working, what's not working. You kind of add that to sort of training and support, then you kind of got everything that you need because you're not on your own because someone else is doing the journey with you.
yeah, no, 100%. It still baffles me to this day, by the way, when you see businesses, especially with like trainee, kind of the young RC level recruiters that, they're by the side of their manager and they're not even having like weekly meetings with them. Like, I remember when,
Some are having side by side training, never mind, but weekly strategy or weekly meetings,
yeah,
is critical.
mate.
And they're in the same room, they see each other, say hello, sit and listen, and they don't do it. So I guess that makes it more important when you're remote, but it should happen whether you're in an office, whether you're remote. The support you get should be the same. It's just a different environment.
Yeah, I'll never forget. This is, I don't want to throw shade on my old business, but like when I left recruitment, that company I was at for nearly 6 years, we used to have like weird. We used to come in 15 minutes early on a Monday, so we used to start work at 8:15, but we'd do like a 15-minute company huddle, and then
Yeah.
sometimes the CEO would play like a motivational video or get someone to share something they've learned, and it was like a motivational thing. And we worked in a
Yeah.
WeWork, so we'd go downstairs, get some croissants, some coffee, and then crack on. When I moved company, I remember coming in and like the after the first week, I started work on Monday, and it was like 8:30, and I'm looking around, and everyone's just cracking along doing emails. None of the team leaders, none of the managers, not the founder, like did anything. I was like, oh, we're just cracking on. I just found it a bit like a
You
culture
need you
shock.
need the kickstart, or you were used to the
I was
kickstart.
just so used to like, right, what's the plan? And then I was like, I spoke to my manager, the CEO, and I was like, do we sit down at the start of the week to kind of go through like what I'm supposed to be doing? He was like, you're the L&D manager, you should know. And I was like, well, yeah, no, I know, but like, do I have to kind of run it past you? He was like, no, just do your thing. I was like, okay.
But it's interesting that because that's obviously become habitual to you, and psychologically you were waiting for it. And I remember an occasion at my last company where when I'd recently started and was managing consultants directly in big groups, and we'd have our start in the morning. And I think I dealing with a client issue that one of the consultants had, and I had my head down and felt people were looking at me. And when I looked up, all the consultants are sort of sat waiting. I think 10 minutes after they'd started because they needed the initial meeting to get started. And it,
Yeah.
it was quite poignant to me because they were all very capable, but they just got into that routine. So just what it does go shows the responsibility you've got of an employer that what you put out, you get back from the staff.
100%. Yeah. So one of the things that you were quite passionate about when we first spoke was the niche specialization. Sorry, again, before we started recording, I was telling you about someone that I worked with that was just doing way too much and working jobs in too many different locations and too many different verticals. And I think most rational people that have been in this industry long enough know that that's kind of a recipe for disaster. It's not setting you up for success. So tell me a little, because I know that in Asia, you've got people that have their set sort of specializations.
Correct,
Talk
yeah.
to me a little bit around how you identify the specializations for people and specifically like what does the specialization slash niching look like to you, basically?
Well, I think as an overarching sort of guide, I tend to think people who are working on billing desks should be working between 3 to 6 job titles, depending on sort of the levels. We tend to work in the white collar space, so we're predominantly sort of senior placements, which for me is always wanted to be a key focus because your candidates are also your clients, so it
Mm.
makes that interaction even more important. And then we try and work in specific spaces. So if I use advanced construction as an example, we'll have people who'll focus on the commercial side. We'll have people who'll focus on the engineering side. We'll have people that'll focus on project managers. And in life science, we might have people who are focusing on the commercial BD side. We've got people who are in doing CDMO, people who are in sort of biopharma. So there are different elements. And I think through interactions with candidates and clients, you find where hotspots are and where the markets are. The reason we've chose and built the business based around logistics, chemical and life science, and advanced construction is because we think they're future proofed. But they're so big. So the example you used before, you need to recycle candidates. You need to be able to build a network. All of the high billing recruiters, or the high percentage, can't say all, a high percentage of the high billing recruiters across the industry will work in niche markets where after 2, 3, 4 years they're the go-to and they're making fees through their network. You only do that if you deal with a specific. So whether you're dealing with quantity surveyors, whether you're dealing with sales directors, whatever your niche is, or you're dealing with C-suite stuff, because we've got people that will work purely at board level. Over time, you build reputations. Over time, your candidates become clients.
Mm.
Your clients then and candidates both give you jobs. So I'm quite a big believer in niche and sort of even building into, we're starting to look at micro niches now, which is nothing more glamorous than we're in a niche, we're working within chemical and life science, we're doing CDMO or we're doing something else, and we're finding there's a hotspot in particular parts. So that's
Mm.
and I think when I joined, we had people working slightly across verticals and were dealing with more client-based relationships, and obviously we've put them into more lanes now, and we've got people really pushing on because they're becoming the go-to after 12, 18, 24 months, and they're building their candidate relationships. But I'm on top of that niche specialism, I'm absolutely focused, and I think everyone who works at AJ is probably bored of hearing it, that I want face-to-face contact with candidates, whether that be obviously over Teams in most scenarios, but
Mm.
it's too easy now to transact over the phone, and COVID made that even more the case because
Mhm.
people were thrown remote. So niche is very, very important to me, and making sure that people stay within a sort of a 3 to 6 job titles. It's hard to put a number on it but you might have 3 or 4 levels within what you're working on, sort of
Yeah.
management.
Yeah, that 3 to 6 job title thing is quite interesting because I had a bit of training during the pandemic when well, all of our markets at least were just obliterated. I had like 19 retained jobs in my team and one of them stayed. So I did like 40K in 2020 and like all the rest of the jobs were just paused. And then 2021 was decent. We had a bit of training from this external guy on obviously a video call because it was a pandemic. And he was saying about like 3 job titles. And I remember like putting my hand up and saying, okay, but I do sales reps, right? So you've got territory manager, senior territory manager, you've got regional manager, national manager, but then also they can kind of do marketing as well. So you've got product manager, marketing exec. So there's more than 3 job titles. And he was quite like old school and firm and saying like, just do territory managers, just do, regional manager, just stay in sales. And I was like, yeah, but I'll place a salesperson in a business and they want a marketing who works side by side with the sales, or a field service engineer or a clinical application specialist. They all work with each other and it's similar-ish briefs. So we had like a bit of a back and forth. And then I came to the conclusion that as long as it is commercial customer facing, so whether that is someone going in to train the customer on a product, do the marketing in person or fix the product or sell the product, I'm just going to do that. And then I thought, okay, geographically speaking, I could do it's the same search for Barcelona and for London. So I'm just going to really, really focus on a product niche. So I chose urology because I'm a bit goofy and I like to take the piss, pardon the pun. And the urology people take the piss all the time.
Right.
So I just that was my definition of like the niche. Now
That's
I work a lot with businesses and solo founders, like trying to help identify their ICP. So when you've sat by the side of a new consultant or someone coming into the business, etc., what's your kind of strategy plan with that person to kind of really map out their ICP?
Well, it'll be it depending on where we plug them in. So if I recently use examples, we've recently plugged somebody into Valencia who focuses purely on the US market. So they're working a specific job title within specific states of the US. Um, that type of for that success to grow, and in the example you gave before around sales and marketing sitting next to each other, they'll need splitting out because there's only so much you can do. So it will depend on what market we put them in. It'll depend on whether it's geographical. So we've got people who are working in Italy who are Italian and French speaking. They work in a very niche part of it might be regulations within life science. They'll have a designated client. Might be 40, 50 clients across whatever geographic. So they're working within a niche, but they're not going by where you can't go over that border or so it really, really depends versus we might put someone into Ireland doing advanced construction contract. They'll very much be working client-led across specific clients in Dublin and then into Europe. But they'll be working specific job titles. They'll stay within their advanced construction piece. So I guess it depends on the market. In your example there of going into a specific part of medicine, that I would imagine the strategy is based on how many clients there are, what's the best route to market, and what levels of candidate. I think for me, working candidates, I think if you're going to have three levels, whether you've got I don't know, a manager, a senior manager, and a director, then working those three levels is really good. And then you've obviously got MDs and owners, right through to someone doing all the engineering pieces, so all the mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, that type of thing. So it depends on the market.
Yeah, yeah, no, I definitely think it does. Because what we done, one of our kind of unique selling points was that we would build out their European team, like their commercial European teams, starting
Yeah.
from like the top down and clinical marketing, etc. But sometimes it's a little bit more challenging if you're doing something like tech, for example. It's that tech person that doesn't have these credentials, qualifications, etc., won't be right for those. So I think it very much does depend on the market. What's your thoughts around kind of dipping your toe into something that's similar? Because I worked with a business at the start of this year that they were so niche in what they'd done that sometimes it was a bit of a hindrance because there was maybe 100 businesses, which is enough, I guess, but they were turning down potential jobs because it was still kind of the same type of role, but a different part of that industry. So how do you kind of deal with that?
I'd probably agree with their logic in that from a if you're in your lane and you're an expert in your market or you're learning the market and you're dealing with candidates, yes, it's tempting to jump over to the left and place a fee. And you know, we've definitely done that where we've been given a role which sits outside the lane, so it might go to someone who's doing some project work and we can source because it's you can do your campaigns on LinkedIn and you can find your candidates through your CRM. But I think it's very much a case of trying to stay within your lanes. If we get enough noise, or which we've had a couple of times where we're seeing from the right, we're getting asked for quite a lot of these. Okay, let's do some research. And if we think there's a market there, we'll go and find someone potentially for that. So we don't want to leave anything on the table, but if you're going to be a generous recruiter, the biggest challenge I've got is the experience the candidate has with the agency. So
Mm,
if I'm working with you and we're placing engineers with you, and you say to me, okay, I've got a business over here. I need you to go and find me a project manager in something completely different. I'll source it. We'll spend time with the candidates. We might do a long list and a short list. We might have 3 to 4 people go for interview, etc., etc. Once I've finished and placed it, and I turn back over to the left over here to get on they're never going to hear from us again. So that's not the experience we want from
mm.
candidates. So I'd rather we I'm big on us being different to other people in our market, because I don't think recruiters look after candidates well enough, and doing that definitely leads you down that road.
Mm. Yeah, no, I do agree. I think if it's a similar type of thing, so I'll give you a good example. So I did the urology market, right? Um, but there was like some roles that were very similar in terms of brief. So some people would work in urology, but then they might go and do orthotics, or they might go and do
Yeah,
wound care or whatever, right? But I
yeah,
wouldn't really BD the wound care companies or the orthotics companies because it wasn't really what I wanted to be known for. But then
no,
sometimes a company would call up and say, "We need help. We're looking for a BDM in the UK," but it's kind of somewhat out of my niche. And then when I figured out what they're looking for, turns out that they don't mind candidates that have worked for some of the companies that I'm trying to target. So I could kind of do a little bit of both in respect that I'd qualify a candidate that had 7 years experience in urology, maybe a couple of years in this sector. They get the job. I'm still keeping in touch with the candidate, still keeping in touch with that client and stuff, to your point, making sure that the service and stuff is good. But the shortlist isn't completely out the realms, because I've
no.
done that before where I've worked like an office manager job for a client because I had a good relationship with her. And it was pointless. Like all those candidates in that shortlist, I'm never going to do anything with them ever again. It was an absolute waste of time. Also, I placed the girl; she got fired 2 weeks later. I was like, I'm never doing that type of job ever again.
Not your world. So I think you're right. I think there's a client relationship point of view. There's been plenty of times where a client said, "Look, I know you don't deal with this. It's very unusual, but we need one of these.
Yeah,
Would you mind helping us?" And of course, we'd help a client in that situation. But that's a one-off that might happen, or a two-off a year, whatever.
yeah,
But
yeah.
that's a big difference between, okay, well, I'm going to recruit for 15 to 20 job titles, and I'm just going to keep moving from left to right, because you physically can't give a service to all those candidates, and you're never going to speak to them again. And we should be speaking to candidates on a very regular basis and building relationships with them.
Yeah, 100%. It sounds like you guys are really, really big on like the managing the candidates, the service stuff. Like, again, I've said this a few times on this episode, but like one of the biggest issues I see is that recruitment consultants, recruitment businesses forget that an element of the job that we do is customer service, right? Like, you might not place the
Big element.
candidate. Yeah, it's huge, right? You might not place the job. So a lot of times you hear like experiences from candidates and clients, and I've got a few friends that are don't like recruiters, put it that way, because they've had really poor experiences. So I know there's something that you're big on at AJ around the training aspect, and I know that you've said that there's such differences between big corporates, boutiques, and stuff. But you know, what do you guys kind of do in respect to the training stuff to make sure the consultants aren't being massively transactional and being more sort of relationship orientated?
Well, we've got a uniformed approach. So we've got a best practice of how we think candidates should be interviewed. Um, and that's trained across the board. So there's a network. We're setting our expectation of what we think. It's not always possible to get candidates on a face-to-face or a Teams interview before, because they're busy and they're
Hmm.
project led, they're senior. Um, but you wouldn't, if you were producing a product, anything around you in your office, you wouldn't not look at it before you sent it to a customer. You wouldn't check it. So that's really important to me. But um, so there's that uniformed approach. And then it'll be reinforced, and we'll be checking to make sure that, have we seen them? We've got we used did a whole tech upgrade, and we've got a new CRM which automates a lot of stuff for people. So
Hmm.
as long as the consultants tag the call or the registration or the whatever task it is, the AI we've built behind each of those tasks automates everything through the phone system, so they don't have. So we're trying to take as much away from them to say, spend more time getting in front of your clients and senior candidates. Sorry, senior candidates, before you're sending them for an interview prep. Even 15 to 20 minutes face to face. I can't quantify this, but the amount of money that you will generate from candidates that you don't place, if people tracked it and actually looked at it, would tell you why you need to look after those candidates. The amount of vacancies that we've placed and previous companies I've worked at have placed based on candidates that we've not placed, but over a 6, 8, 12 week period have built up, or longer, have built up a relationship with the recruiter.
Mm.
And if they get somewhere and they've got autonomy to recruit, they come back to myself or us, because the service they got, they want other candidates to get. So I'm quite big on that, but I'm also a realist that the world's changed, technology's changed. You
Hmm.
can't spend an hour and a half with candidates all the time, and that's not what we expect. But we do expect there to be a face to face before someone goes towards a client.
Yeah, I worked in the two last businesses I worked for had a very different philosophy on this. So when I was a recruiter, we had a rule where we weren't allowed to submit a candidate unless we've actually met them.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's like if like you said, if they're a direct European sales director, they're super busy, and it's like I've tried, but they're so busy and all the rest of it. But at some point, you would meet them, like especially before an interview, an offer, sorry. But I
Yeah.
want to say that 90% of the time we would have met a candidate, whether it's a Zoom or, a face-to-face coffee, whatever. But then the next company I worked at, they had this philosophy that you can make five candidate qualifications in a morning versus going into London to go and meet someone for a coffee. And I felt I was a little bit baffled by that because I think you and I have got a similar mindset in respect that it's not necessarily about the win now. Like you might be meeting a candidate to present a job and you might get an interview, you might get a placement. But are we also forgetting that if you don't place them and you give them a good service, they might have recommendations, they might have project insights, they might be a hiring manager in the future. Like, I feel like some people are forgetting the big picture when it comes to that stuff.
Yeah, we're in a people industry, and face to face or relationships. We're talking about teams, aren't we? And how teams
Hmm.
can allow you to remote recruit people across Europe and into the US. And we feel very much part of a bigger team. And when we meet for the first time, it doesn't feel like we're friends. We already know each other. So that has to go towards candidates. I think probably if you asked candidates what their biggest frustration with recruiters is, it'll be that you register with them or you speak to them and then you never hear from them again. And you've got to come away from that. And by being sort of niche and looking after candidates and just putting yourself out there and okay, 7:30 at night, I might need to jump on a WhatsApp video or a Teams and just have a chat with a candidate before they go to see
Yeah.
a client on Friday. It's critical.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think that I know because I've worked with a handful of recruiters in my career, and the two recruiters that have always kind of stuck in my mind, one of them literally sits on our board now, but similar to what you just said, would call me at 9 p.m. whilst he's bathing his kid to prep me for my interview in the morning and to get feedback for the interview I just had after work. Like, insane. The
Yeah.
recruiter before that, I'd never met a recruiter on a video call. She was based somewhere else in the country. And as she was trying to take me to market, she was like, I want to jump on a Teams with you. I love your energy, but I just want to see your face. And I was like, okay. Like, I got on a video call with her and she was asking me about it was like nothing to do with like my career. It was just about me as a person, like what my hobbies, tell me about the family, who do you live with, blah, blah, blah. And I was initially kind of thrown back, like, I'd never had a recruiter like actually take an interest in me and my life as opposed to what's on my CV. And that those two really stuck with me, and so much so that the guy that got me into L&D, I obviously called him when I got signed off to hire in my team because I got such a good service from the person. So I
And
genuinely
you're
think
talking about
it's
him now. You're talking about him now. So and that's half the point. If you're dealing with candidates who are in senior positions, well, where will they be in 10 years? And when they're in 10 years, so you've got to look after people. But I just think recruitment, I didn't want to be a transactional recruitment business pre-COVID in my last company. I
Mhm.
was terrified that recruitment would become transactional through COVID because all of a sudden everyone's equipped with MacBooks and laptops and are working from home. Like if you want to stand out in the market, do something a bit different. And we're not saying, do something, you know, very extreme. It's just speak to people face to face, even 15, 20 minutes, just so you can personalize it because I guarantee you'll get a more committed candidate. They don't let you down as much. They want to support you, but also more importantly, you get to know who they are so you can find them the right role. So I just think transactional recruitment is just the opposite of what anything I'd ever go near.
Yeah, I agree. We used to have this little phrase in my old office when you'd gone and met a candidate in person for a coffee or met a client or whatever it is. The next call, like all the senior people, and eventually when I became senior, we would tell the more junior people, tell me how that next call is after your face-to-face meeting. And people would always look at you, and I was this person like, okay, bear in mind I did a lot of face-to-face, but it was with nurses, it was not as commercial. That next call you have after you met them in person. Oh, that coffee place was really good, wasn't it? Oh, that
Yeah,
pub was really nice. Oh, the food was really good. You've just got a completely different relationship with that person.
agreed. And I know somebody who works at a different business who's a well, they're not at that business anymore, but a 400,000 or 500,000 pound biller in the US, based in the UK. Really good. Like I'd hire them tomorrow. Brilliant recruiter. And they weren't allowed to go over to New York to see their clients. And I think if you think that they're going to generate four or 500,000 pounds in fees or 400, 4 or 500,000 dollars, for a couple of £1,000 to get them over to New York once or twice a year to meet their clients and take them out for coffee. I can't sort of understand that. And we were in Dublin in February meeting clients, some of our bigger clients, and they were really worthwhile meetings, and they've allowed us to get to some. We've just signed one of the big clients up, and it's took a very long process to get there because they're a big client. I don't think we'd have probably had as much joy getting to this point had we not met them and took the time to go over and see them. So I'm big on that. I'm big on going out and see clients.
Yeah, I've got a funny anecdote before we go to the last thing. It's just reminded me. I remember I tried to get involved with this company, right? It was a medical grade lube business, right? So random, so on brand for me as a recruiter. But it was like lubricant for like endoscopy, colonoscopy, and stuff like that. But anyway, I saw that they were advertising for this role, and I tried to reach the owner of the business so many times. Whenever I saw him at exhibitions, he was always busy, so I could just never get his time. And then I tried to call the office to speak to him, and I got through to the internal recruiter, which most experienced recruiters, when you hear that, you're like, oh God, like I'm just going to be like stopped and whatever. Really, really nice lady, and she was like, basically like, give me 2 weeks to work this job, and then if I do need help, I like your approach, I'll come back to you. And I said, okay, how about we do this? If in 2 weeks you still haven't filled the job, I'll go out of my way, I'll get on a train, I'll come meet you in your Leeds office. I've never been to Leeds, it'd be nice. And she was like, you've never been Leeds before? It's like, all right, cool, fine. Like, give me a call in 2 weeks. Gave her a call in 2 weeks. She was like, cool, if you can come this week, come up to the office. Got off the train station in Leeds, some old geezer walks past. Morning. I was like, what? Random people in the north just say good morning, like to strangers. Like, this is a culture shock. In London, you look at someone, they think you're weird. I was like, okay, cool, whatever. Go into the office. I finally meet the owner after years of trying to reach out to him, shook his hand, had a proper long meeting with the internal recruiter, took the job on. She showed me their stock room. She said, by the way, this is her quote, why don't you take back some medical grade lube to have some fun with your colleagues? Random thing to say, but extremely memorable. So I had a backpack of lube.
Smile, nod, and leave at that point, isn't it?
Yeah. But honestly, when I did get back to the office, everyone was like, "This is the most ridiculous client meeting you've ever had."
If I've ever had.
Yeah, but at the end of it, like we spoke a little bit about exclusivity and stuff, and she said, "I get calls from recruiters every single day. Most of the time, I hang up after the intro because they're just so transactional. Not a single one has asked to come and meet me in the office. Not a single one. You come from London, like 2 hours or whatever on the train to come and meet me. It's just like I actually want to work with you. I want to give you this job." And we placed about 2 or 3 people, decent fees or whatever. And I basically said after we'd done that placement to everyone in the office that yes, it was a long way away. Yes, it was basically a whole day out. But I'm not just thinking of just the job, that's the relationship. So much so that when I moved into L&D, I saw that one of the consultants put a lead on the system for that company. So I called the internal recruiter and said, oh, this girl was recruiting in Salesforce now. Do you want to have a chat with her? And she was like, fine. Like, people don't think like long term. Do you know what I mean? People are very transactional, very short term thinking, I think.
And if you're good and you should be working with the same client 5, 10, 15 years down the track, you've got to build those relationships. So face to face is critical. Like, if you're going to be a transactional recruiter, you're not going to be very good.
Yeah, 100%, mate. Well, look, we've been talking for nearly an hour now. I've really enjoyed it. It's absolutely flown by, to be fair. But as you know, my last question I end off every episode with is, following today's episode, how can people get 1% better in recruitment?
And it's probably a fairly obvious angle I'm going to go down. I think 1%'s a small amount, but I think if my advice would be to not be transactional, would be to try and be visible to candidates and clients. Face to face in some capacity would be my approach. And if you are transactional, or if you can't be bothered just going that extra sort of yard to do something, then that would be my advice, would be to see more candidates and see more clients.
Love it. I totally agree. Rich, thank you very much for coming on the show today. I'll put all your details in the description, so people listening to this, go and connect with him. Really appreciate your time. And for everyone that's made it this far, thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll see you next week. Thanks so much for tuning into this week's episode. If you enjoyed, make sure that you like this video. If it's on YouTube, drop us a comment. Make sure you're subscribing and following on Apple, Spotify, whatever platform it is that you tune into this podcast. We have been releasing episodes every single Tuesday since September 2024. So super consistent. Couldn't do it without these phenomenal people that come on the show, and of course you that listen and watch every single week. If you or someone that you know are interested, I'm always looking for more people to come on the show, as long as they have got some passion and some value to offer our industry, in hopes that every episode we of course help people get one step better in recruitment. Then shoot me a DM and we'll get you or whoever it is booked into the show. But thank you again so much for tuning in. Really appreciate all the support, and we'll see you next week.